My biggest lessons from mentors and changes in the way that I operated businesses didn't come from my ears, from listening to what others were telling me. They came from people who you would least expect it because they weren't trying to teach me. They were just acting successfully, and I paid attention.
Welcome to Conversations That Grow, where we explore how the right conversations can shape our business, leadership, and even how we see the world. Today, I'm speaking to Jose Berlanga, a serial entrepreneur with nearly 4 decades of experience across multiple industries. From undercapitalized startups to hard-won turnarounds, Jose has lived the highs and lows of business building, and he's refreshingly honest about all of it. Welcome to the show, Jose.
Hi, Sadaf. It's great to be here.
Jose, let's kick things off with a moment that shaped your path. What's a conversation you had that changed the way you think about leadership or business growth?
Unfortunately, I don't think that one single conversation ever changes anything.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, that most of us stubborn business owners listen very little. We may pay attention to a lot of signs, to a lot of recommendations. I'm going to answer it a little bit different, and
Okay.
then I'll get to your answer. But I was, as a young guy, I was inundated with recommendations, with advice, with moments where people attempted to tell me how to start and how to build and how to grow. Unfortunately, most of that, over time, I started realizing that all of that information and all of that advice came from people who weren't necessarily following their own advice and executing things. It is very easy to give advice. It is very easy to teach others. It is very easy to solve other people's problems and try to understand circumstances from the outside. But only when you're in the ring receiving the punches, it is that you get most of the lessons. So to my demise, unfortunately, I was one of those rare instances, a young entrepreneur that actually listened to many recommendations. And I found over time that the best decisions in my career were the ones that came from my heart, my gut feeling. I had a good sense of understanding in the world of business. And as I began to experience my own destiny and make my own decisions and blend them with recommendations, I began to do better. For a while, I kept trying to listen too much to people who were not vested in my own companies and in my own activities. Now, was there one single moment? There has been moments in which I observed. I'll wrap it up by saying my biggest lessons from mentors and changes in the way that I operated businesses didn't come from my ears, from listening to what others were telling me. They came from people who you would least expect it because they weren't trying to teach me. They were just acting successfully, and I paid attention. So my biggest lessons came from me observing others who were doing well, who were executing the way that I wanted to execute, and I attempted to duplicate. So those who were my best mentors in life didn't even realize they were teaching me. The ones that were attempting to teach me were saying a lot and doing very little. Unfortunately, that was my path.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. There's so many great points in what you've said. I'd love to unpack some of it. One of the things you said was you had this gut feeling and had a good understanding sense of what business is and should look like. Where did that come from?
A little bit from my nature.
Okay.
Of building things. I had that rare personality. I don't think it's that rare anymore, but when I was starting, most people wanted to find security and stability Entrepreneurship, when I began my career, was not what it is today. Today, it has globalized. It has been open to many, many areas that back then didn't even exist. The business world was a little more simple, more cookie cutter. You would start and build a business. Now, anybody, even from home, you can have a computer and turn just about anything into a business. But I had a little bit of that personality since I was very young. And I also had the opportunity to surround myself with people who were very much into growth, into building businesses, into making their own destinies, building their own careers. And that was one of my my passions from an early age. I felt that I didn't fit into the corporate world. I think that was one of the triggers. Since I was very young, due to my personal circumstances, due to the way that I grew up, I wanted to be a high-level executive. It's always appealing to run a large corporation. And here's an important point, perhaps, that I felt. I wanted to grow in the corporate ladder because I felt that that was the best of both worlds, making a lot of money, growing, being successful without the risk. That's the best. When you grow and you work for a very big company, that's wonderful. But I didn't feel like I would fit in there. So I had to create things for myself. I had to build my own path. And I started very small. But unfortunately, that is the other extreme where everything is a gamble. Everything is risky. Everything is uncertain. So I just felt that that was better for me. And I followed it my entire career.
Fantastic. And Jose, if you don't mind, I'd love to know what your personal circumstances were and how they played into this.
Well, obvious, and everyone around me knows a little bit of what happened in my childhood. I went through a pretty dramatic accident that left me with covered in burns and 3rd-degree burns and scars, and so it was a very difficult childhood, growing up, being looked at different, whether it was with the eyes of pity, or whether it was from the eyes of being ridiculed or being stared at. And from that point, you make a decision. You either turn into a victim and you run away from life and you try to just not face your new reality, or you do the opposite, which is what I did. I at one point, when I began to understand, which was very early in life, by the way, I was just a small child of 4 years of age.
Oh, wow.
Once I faced my new reality, I soon after decided to go in a different direction. I decided that I was not going to be looked at by my appearance, but by my actions and by my success and by my achievements. And I began to try very, very hard to succeed from a very young age in every aspect of life. Perhaps not in sports very much. That was never really my strength. But in social skills, selling, getting along with others, building the fundamentals that I didn't know meant a lot in the business world. This is an interesting part. As a child, I was building all of the building blocks that business requires, which is people skills, negotiating, knowing how to sell, knowing how to build relationships, knowing how to get along with others, earning respect from others. I never knew those things would come handy as I grew up and transferred a little bit of that experience into the business world. So it started young.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that about your accident, but it's fantastic that you refused to play victim and turned it around to make the most out of what you had. As you said, like those people skills that you've been able to develop, they go a long ways no matter whether you're in business or at home or anywhere else. That goes a long ways.
We never know how tragedy, I know it's talked about, is often talked about, but it's rarely executed when we appreciate some of the bad things, some of the adversity and problems that we face. Once we look back in retrospect, those are the biggest lessons, and if we learn how to utilize them to our advantage, they can be great assets in every aspect. That is when you actually learn about life. When things go wrong, there's very little to learn when everything goes perfect, when everything is easy, simple. And back then, I really enjoy the process of becoming actually a leader, being heard, being listened, attracting people for who I was and what I had to say. And that turned into a personality that developed over time and was adapted into the business world. And I really, really enjoy it. I mean, I have a lot of people that like working with me. I became a very, very popular and easy person to work with in many ways. And that has been a great asset in the business world for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Jose, you were talking about leadership and how that's helped you develop leadership. Your circumstances have helped you develop that. And actually something you were saying early on, that you learned not from listening, but from watching those who didn't even realize they were teaching you something. And as you were saying that, I was thinking that is what a good leader is. Someone who can show by their actions and teach by their actions rather than having to say words that they, as you were saying before, like you can give advice but not follow your own advice, but they're actually doing what they say.
Yeah. When someone is the very best that they can be, you never know who's observing. Yes. You want to be a good influence. You want to convey a good message, often about how to improve not only your life, but help others improve their life and become better businessmen and women, live a healthier life. And we don't realize that the brain learns more by following others, by paying attention, and by leaders. The famous saying, lead by example. And that's a reality. That's been for me. I felt that written lessons and verbal lessons were not as impacting, and people that were successful were admired by me. I wanted to be better. I wanted to pay attention, and I was very good at observing and duplicating. And I think that over the years that has turned now where I'm trying to be the best person that I can be. The discipline, the actions, the activity, the personality, the routines that you follow, they can be infectious, and other people eventually will hopefully try to emulate some of them and help by doing that. By just being, we don't realize how much we can help others by just being a good version of ourselves.
That's a really good point. I like that. I think just being present and, as you say, being a good version of ourselves actually speaks volumes to those who are watching.
I try, at least all of us. We can always improve. But yeah, that's and of course in the world of business there is a point where you can overdo it, when you can become seen as the workaholic, the obsessive compulsive, who never has enough. So you have to pay attention. That is also something that I've learned, because at some point I became quite obsessed with work and responsibilities in business. I think you can go overboard once you start achieving some success or start enjoying what it is that you're doing, or start reaching some goals that we tend to raise the bar and raise the objectives and never have enough. That's something that a lot of entrepreneurs have to pay attention to have those limitations. And once you begin to reach some goals, start having some balance
Yeah.
because you also don't want to give that message about always wanting more, never having enough, and never feeling satisfied with where you are in life. You can fall into that trap, and that's a scary one too.
Yeah. Yeah. Jose, you started talking a bit about entrepreneurship. I'd love to have you go a little bit more into what the realities of being an entrepreneur is like, because you've had quite a few businesses, and you've talked a bit about, being obsessed with it, overworking, overstressed. I mean, those are the not so nice things. But I mean, is there other stuff that you'd want to draw out?
Well, there's so much to this career that I call it a life choice. Owning a business, starting a business is not just a job. It's not a profession. It's really a way to live that is not for everyone, and I don't recommend it to everyone who does not have that personality, the tolerance for uncertainty, for a little bit of pain, for always having. I do compare a little bit of having small children, where you have to always be there 24 hours, 7 days a week, and it absorbs you. The world of entrepreneurship is a little bit misunderstood. Owning a business is often referred to as the ticket to freedom and to financial independence. And first of all, it's not always that way. You have to go through a lot before you get there. And also, there are a sequence of events that are very, very tough, very complicated before you actually achieve that. My joy of discussing entrepreneurship is not focusing just on the success, but discussing the path that leads you to that. The rocky road, the complications, the sleepless nights, the setbacks, the endless headaches. And it never ends. It keeps going. It turns into a lifestyle. But some can manage it very well. Some can tolerate the unknown, the ability to not understand how you're going to solve your financial problems, how you're going to take care of payroll and overhead and rent. And you don't know. You never know. Business changes. Circumstances change. Markets adapt. They're cyclical. They're complicated. And you cannot just work. You have to think. When you're an entrepreneur, when you're a business owner, there's a very, very big difference between getting up and just going through the motions, actions, returning emails, doing this, performing tasks that you were asked to do, required to do in your job, versus waking up to designing a day, designing activities, solving problems, making decisions, going through a number of choices that can change your life, not only building things and creating work for yourself, but supervising and making sure that your team is focused and understanding the direction of your vision and knowing how to execute their own tasks. It's not just about what you do, but it's about every motion that every member of your organization is executing that will actually take your company somewhere. So at some point, it's easy to burn out, by the way. Very, very much like an athlete, call it a marathon runner or a swimmer or weightlifting, where you need some time off for your muscles to recover. After a while, those athletes get better and better at the recovery period. They can snap out of it, get back on it without the pain, without being sore. The same happens for entrepreneurs. Some people get drained and exhausted by constantly being in chaos, in the middle of problems and issues and setbacks. But you develop your ability to recover from them, to take a little break and get back to it. and continue to build and continue to move forward. But you have to build that tolerance and that resistance, let's call it. And it's not easy. Some people have it by nature. Some others really want it, so they develop it by putting a lot of effort and a lot of stamina into it.
Thank you. Jose, you likened entrepreneurship to an athlete. You talked about recovery. But what about the aspect of pacing yourself? So if you are first starting out, and especially if you're not, if it doesn't come to you naturally, you have to develop it. And I think often people will just give, 110% straight out of the gate for a very long time. And that, as you said, leads to burnout. But how could they pace themselves even while they're still discovering it for themselves, if that makes any sense?
Yes. As a business owner, it's very difficult to pace yourself because your brain never shuts down. So I'll break it into two parts. As a person, as a leader, I'm not going to give any advice about how to pace yourself and how to slow down because I haven't found that. I perhaps now have the luxury of being able to. I don't need to work to make a living. Now I do it out of passion, out of hunger and desire to do more. I want to live a life that outlives me, perhaps. I'm one of those people that I'm more interested in leaving something interesting behind, not just in this world and in this generation, but I want to leave some form of a legacy. And for that, your brain gets very, very active. For example, something that also is often talked about in business ownership is that headaches and problems and bad circumstances keep you up at night. But the reality is that as a leader, everything keeps you up at night. The good stuff, the ideas, the progress. You wake up in the middle of the night and start writing yourself new concepts that you come up with. So the good, the bad, and the ugly, there's this passion, there's this excitement about moving forward in the world of business that keeps you going, and eventually it's everything. In the early stages is only the bad stuff, perhaps, that keeps you up at night. But the more you get incorporated in building things and creating a new life for yourself, everything wakes you up early in the morning. You begin to adapt to this new persona that just wants to live and do and create. So I cannot tell you that there's a way. You have to manage your own balance. But now I'm going to talk about another section of pacing yourself. This one is perhaps more important than the mental one. The growth part, that one is very scary. You can work 24 hours a day in your brain if you can manage it, if you can handle it, that's okay, go for it. But don't grow your business so fast, so strong, so recklessly, because businesses are at the most vulnerable position and circumstances when they're growing. Most business owners don't realize that as a business grows, things change completely. You're almost restarting a new business. You have new manuals, new positions, new employees, new circumstances, new markets. You have to redefine the flow of things, the way that things work. You have to redefine your finances. You need to raise more capital. You need to learn how to allocate it. Growth is incredibly difficult and incredibly dangerous. Leverage, borrowing money from lenders or from investors, very difficult, very dangerous. So that's where you need to pace yourself as an entrepreneur. Slow down and manage your growth, manage your leverage, your debt ratio, manage the pace in which you exercise some of your ideas. You can have all the activities going on in your brain, but you just have to organize them and execute them in an organized manner, because that's where I've gotten in trouble. I don't get in trouble just always doing something because I need it. I enjoy it. It's part of who I am. But when I get in trouble is when I start executing a little too much, too fast. things can fall apart.
If you don't mind, I'd love to know more about maybe a time where that did happen for you, and how did you lead yourself through that?
It's happened to me more than once, more than I like to have been there in growing pains. I call them growing tortures, growing nightmares. A business in a growing mode is incredibly challenging because you have to manage the existing business, and normally a small business does not generate the resources, the capital to grow, unless you're a very unique concept, sort of a high-tech, a very innovative concept where as you reach certain goals, you can raise more capital. That's for a very unique sector of the business world. In reality, most businesses have to grow organically. And it's difficult because a business does not generate enough cash to run, to operate, and to grow. That's very rare. You have to become very, very good at juggling things. So, for example, I've grown a chain of cafes where maybe we went a little too fast. And before establishing our systems well enough and fine-tuning a lot of details, we started opening more stores, and things fell apart and eventually lost that business. In my exporting company, it happened where we began to invest too much money looking for new sources of income instead of focusing on systems and structure. In the real estate, perhaps was my biggest fault because this was a very big structure, a multi-million-dollar organization that was doing 100 million plus in revenues, and we were growing, where we over-leveraged ourselves. We borrowed way too much money, and it happened to hit us during a very difficult moment in time in the economy, where it caught us with way too many developments, way too many land positions, and most of all, too much overhead and a lot of debt. So when the economy slowed down, supporting that debt, supporting that overhead was impossible. So we began to little by little just lose equity and lose our business over time. Thankfully, we didn't completely go out of business, but it cost us millions, and it cost us many years of recovery, having grown so fast. So unless you really, really already have the infrastructure or a model that can raise institutional funds and that can grow exponentially, you have to be very, very cautious how you go about it.
I'm curious, for someone who's had so many, multiple ventures, what's a mindset then or value that you carry with you that helps you or that enables you to have so many, I suppose?
As I move forward in my career, I try to fine-tune my mission. That is something that I didn't have in my earlier years. As a young entrepreneur, my mission was very blurry. My objectives were very geared towards finances, financial results, making more. It was very abstract. I didn't know exactly what I wanted out of my business, out of my company, where I wanted to take it. I didn't have an exit strategy. I didn't have a purpose other than to just grow, which eventually does not take you anywhere. So as I've evolved as a business person, I try to give my business and my activities a little more meaning as to why I am doing what I'm doing, what it is that I'm trying to improve or solve in the business world. What am I trying to accomplish? Where am I trying to get? And that purpose begins to fine-tune some of your activities. Having that famous why. Why am I doing this? It almost fulfills you a little more. It almost gives a meaning to everything that you do, other than to just go after another dollar and simply not knowing where this journey is taking you. Sometimes we get so busy just doing the day to day that there's nothing to support your mission emotionally. So I think that's where I've changed the most. That I want to enjoy what I'm doing a little more. I want to really like my activities, which is perhaps what I've earned. When you're starting, you haven't earned anything. You just have to work hard and pay your dues. But eventually, once you get to the other side, then now you can start shifting and allocating some of the activities that you don't like, pass them on, share them amongst people who like to work in those areas that are dreadful for you. And now you can focus in the type of activities within the business that are more pleasurable for you. So I don't believe in just passion.
Yeah.
I think that business requires a little bit of effort. Not every sector of a company is exciting, and that's where a lot of entrepreneurs get discouraged. That the moment they start running into activities that are not fun, they lose interest. And you just need to understand that that's a portion of the process, and you just have to do it. And eventually you can start pivoting into more of a fun side of your career and your business.
Yeah, and as you say, that comes with time. You've described how you've evolved as a businessman because of your journey. I'd love to know how your leadership has evolved as well in that time.
A lot. I do think that one of the key ingredients in any leader is developing the activity to identify talent, becoming a good judge of character, which I was not. One of the characteristics of a good salesperson is that they're also very gullible. It's so funny, but you can be very, very good at selling things, but you can easily be sold. That's a characteristic. I walk into a store and I'm easily convinced, and I may walk out with things that I didn't even go in looking for. And eventually, you have to understand that side of this personality. So when I was hiring, training, I used to try to make people fit into my world, into my business. I made that mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs make, which is to try to create a team, try to build a team with personalities that are not necessarily correct for the job. You want them to work, you want to train them, you want them to succeed. And I've learned to become better at, instead of finding just people to fill in the blanks, I try to find leaders who are very, very passionate or very qualified for the specific activity that they're going to be helping me with. I would spend too much time selling my company. This is a very, very big change that I've executed. In other companies that I had, in other businesses that I own, I would invest too much energy convincing my team to like the mission, to enjoy the mission, to enjoy their work, to love their activities, instead of figuring out how to find people who already had that in them, who would come in and want to execute those activities without any effort. Yeah. And you become better at that, rather than just trying to build a team around your business. You begin to talk less and listen more to your team. That is something that I've also tried to do. Instead of always trying to enforce and impose my ideas, to even in an interview, we make that mistake that we start talking a lot about the job and the company and who you are and how things work. instead of really asking the right questions and understanding who you're hiring and making sure that that person is going to elevate your company to the next level, as opposed to just come in to perform a list of duties.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think when you hire in that manner, you also are helping the person that you're taking on, because they're going to be able to walk in and hit the ground running and really enjoy what they're doing rather than feel like they have to fit into a mold.
Correct. And it's very easy. We've made that mistake where in those famous growing pains, you start needing more help in every area. In engineering and design and purchasing and accounting and sales. And so you begin to get a little bit relaxed in the process of hiring without really being cautious in selecting. The big companies have human resource departments. They even have go through a psychological profile, and they ensure that everyone that they hire is ideal for the right position, and that they're perfect, and that they are going to, like you said, they're going to love their work. Therefore, they're going to give everything. But when you're a small entrepreneur, you don't have those resources. You just kind of have to guess.
Make do.
and figure it out.
Yeah.
And I'll end by this topic by saying we're going to make mistakes in hiring, in training, in selecting, in building that famous team that will help your company develop. But you have to be quick in letting go when you made the wrong selection. I have made this fatal mistake. I've made the wrong selection in team members, in allocating the wrong person to the wrong job, or the right job position, but the wrong person. And I waited too long for that person to become better at that activity, to my demise. Before you know it, you have a lot of members of your organization that are not quite right for the job. And you have to be a little bit cold-hearted for the sake of your business, and let go. And just understand, didn't work, let's move on. Like in relationships, speed dating. You have to get more in. And I was, you do it with professionalism, with dignity. You do it the proper way. But I used to go in the other extreme, where I wanted to save every single person in my companies and make sure that everyone was successful and did well and enjoy the work, as opposed to focusing and saving my company, which was the whole purpose of having hired the correct team. So that's something that we need to do. We need to be a little bit, unfortunately, the only word is cold, and just look at it as a business transaction. If someone is not working, move on.
Yeah. You said that you weren't always good at identifying talent or judging character. How did you get better at that? Was that through listening, or was there something else?
Yes. I became a better leader, a better judge of character by pacing myself, by not rushing the process, the selection process of hiring someone. And you're right, by listening more than talking, which leaders are naturally sales personalities. They are hustlers, so we talk a lot, we communicate a lot, and sometimes we don't listen enough. We don't learn enough about individuals. Designing the right sequence of questions about understanding not only the manual of operations that each sector, that each department within your company needs, but understanding the details and the qualifications. And then when you start going through your selection process, you have to be very strategic in the way that you ask those questions, even down to trick questions. How do these personalities organize a day? Taking them through a day from the moment they wake up. How do they do this? How do they do that? What are their systems for executing different activities and solving a number of problems? So you have to be very, very detailed in understanding who you're hiring and the personality that you need for that particular job. And going through a number of perhaps even tests. But I get back to, if it doesn't work, because it will happen, here's the reality. Some people are very, very good in the interviewing process. They're magnificent. They're great communicators. They can tell you what you want to hear, and they can guess, and they can come up with the right answers, but they're awful at executing. And vice versa. Some people get very shy. They get very scared. They're not quite as perhaps charming in that process, but they're wonderful at getting things done. So sometimes it's a little bit of luck in finding the right talent. Sometimes I've been surprised at people that I just didn't think would cause that much impact to myself and to my company, eventually turn out to be great assets and that helped me grow and even became partners of mine that came into entry-level positions and eventually partnered with me or exceeded my expectations and eventually went on and started their businesses. I've had a lot of people that work for me that eventually went on and started their own companies and became very successful, and I love to see that.
That's wonderful. That reminds me, when we were first talking in our pre-call a few weeks ago, I think you mentioned you're also mentoring people. Is that right?
Unofficially, yes. Talking about that transition, about reinvention that I'm enjoying now that I've come out with my second book and working on the third one. I don't do this quite often where I'm officially doing a lot of public speaking and in training and whatnot, but I love being a guest speaker for students, universities, sales teams, and companies that are going through some of the steps that you and I are talking about, the growing pains, the allocation of the different responsibilities. I love doing that. I enjoy it. I think a very fun question that I was recently asked was if you could do something, if money was not an issue, if you didn't need to make money, which thankfully I'm at that stage where I can begin to do that. What career would you choose? What would you do for free? What career, what activity would you choose? And not many of us think that way. Normally, we are obligated to make a living and support ourselves or our family, and we rarely really just focus on what it is that we would spend our time doing. And that is part of it. I think I would have been a teacher, or I would have been a trainer, or I would have been a communicator. I love helping others. And as we talked about, not just verbally, but by example. And this is perhaps one of the reasons why I didn't do it early on. I wanted to be a mentor. I wanted to be a life coach, let's call it, a motivational speaker. But I didn't think that I had lived enough. I didn't feel that I had the credentials. I see that in a lot of life coaches, that they haven't lived, they haven't suffered, they haven't owned businesses, they haven't lost businesses, they haven't been multimillionaires and then gone back to not being able to pay the rent and known how it feels and how to get back on your feet and know how to go through those motions. I felt that I needed to experience all of that before I can actually communicate it and how to help others go through those things. You cannot tell someone how to be a parent when you don't have kids. You cannot tell someone how to own a business when you haven't owned one. So now that I've been through a lot of that, I feel some of those qualifications, not to mention that I continue to do it. I continue to run companies and to stay very, very busy. But as I face a little more out of my day-to-day, I love doing it. I'm always available for people who need some advice or ideas or recommendations or to even learn a little bit about what this life of entrepreneurship is.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. You're right. I mean, I think experience, good or bad, is so valuable. Yeah.
It's a necessary. I think we underestimate how pain and adversity are necessary and part of this journey of life, of business, and even in friendship, whatever topic we discuss, marriage, relationships, everything needs to have those ups and downs. And we tend to not want to go through the bad ones. We avoid them rather than embrace them, rather than just realize that all of those bad experiences will eventually become something wonderful. But at the moment, it doesn't appear to be that way, and we all tend to run away from the pain. Sometimes I think that we just need to practice it. We need to try to put ourselves in difficult positions. I do that a lot, particularly in business. I get into deals that I know better. I know that at some point I'm going to want to walk away from them, or question why I started this venture or got into this investment. But it keeps me going. It keeps my mind agile. It keeps me active and passionate about life.
That's great, Jose. It sounds to me like you're building that legacy that you've been wanting to leave behind.
Well, thank you. That's the purpose. We'll see where this goes. I intend to eventually talk about other subjects. I've been very anonymous in the business world. I've been too busy just running the day-to-day, just being overwhelmed with what I have to do. You know, that famous list of things to do every day that is long and it's tedious and
that gets longer.
Yeah, and we never get around to either to the tip of the iceberg of all the things we want to do in one day. But eventually you have to make time for your passion projects. And that's where I am right now, where I'm beginning to realize that I've done enough in the business world, and that I need to begin to do some things that I actually enjoy, or that I don't want to get too old and look back and with regret.
Yeah.
And think back and say, why didn't I actually do some of these things that the bucket list, the famous bucket list? What are some of the things that I don't want to end this life without ever having done? And writing books was one of them. Not a book. I want to write several subjects that are interesting to me. First is the industry that I'm in, and then I'm starting to gradually get into other subjects that are very, very interesting.
That's wonderful, Jose. This has been really fun. I really enjoyed your honesty and you sharing your experiences with us. Before we wrap up, though, tell us a little bit about the books that you've written and the one you're writing, and also how can our listeners, find them and also connect with you.
Absolutely. The first book that I wrote, The Business of Home Building, was a tribute to my career, not to my journey as an entrepreneur, but to the business that I devoted the majority of my career, which was home building. And it was devoted to explaining the business side of the construction industry, how to start, how to build a company. This information can be very, very helpful regardless of the industry that you're in, because all of the story as I tell it talks about the sequence of events that take place when you're trying to build something. I use the residential construction as the heart of the story, but at the end of the day, the steps are very similar. So it's very much an entrepreneur book. And most people eventually are going to be in the real estate business, whether you're even a tenant, when you rent a space, rent a home, buy a home, build your own house, or or you're a realtor, a broker. All of these areas of the world of real estate are at some point going to be part of our life, and this book is very much geared towards that industry. Then I finished the second book, which is Dirt Rich,
Okay.
which talks about land development, land investing, land speculating. It's very much directed about the discussions related to land as the main character in the world of real estate, and how everything begins with a selection of a piece of land in order for our communities to become what they are. So it's a little bit of how-to, but it also gives you a lot to think about. It's a thought-provoking book that will help you identify not only opportunities, but understand this valuable and amazing resource called land. Then I moved towards the third one is a book by the name of Quantum Entrepreneurship, which is very, very much about mind over matter, how we have much more control over our activities, over our destiny, over our businesses than what we think.
Yeah.
How the mind can create outcomes, how focus can give you results, and how most of us find excuses for not doing what we want and for finding the achievements and the success that we are searching for. So I talk about the realities, the raw truth about entrepreneurship, what it means, the identity, the personality, the identity, the life choices that one must make in order to get there, and we move on from there. But hopefully the third book will also be out soon, Quantum Entrepreneurship.
Sounds fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that information. For our listeners, if you are tuning in, thank you for joining us. And you'll find all the links and details that Jose has mentioned about his books in the show description. Do check them out and look out for that third one. And if you're someone who's been thinking about using conversations to grow your own business, maybe even through a podcast, but don't have time to handle all the moving parts, we can help you with that at Pod Junction. So head on over to podjunction.com to find out more, or just reach out to me on LinkedIn, and my links will also be in the show description. So from Jose and from me, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.